Welcome back to Swanson's Garage, everybody. In the interest of going back and working on previous projects like I talked about last week, let's revisit this front axle that is bent up. The reason I'm working on this is because I recently picked up a 2035 short fender front axle from a guy on the Allis Chalmers forum that had it for sale. It was axle and spindles and tie rod. And I picked it up because one of my future projects has a very twisted up front axle and broken spindles. So it was a perfect fit. Worked out great because it was down in the neighborhood of my Uncle Tom. So Uncle Tom was able to pick it up on the way up to visit my folks on one of his trips. So I got it hauled up there conveniently. So that worked out good. Thanks, Uncle Tom. Thanks, Matt, for selling me the axle. Dad has since taken it apart, gotten the spindles off, and he discovered that the axle itself was bent, much like this 1525 axle is bent. So if I put a straight edge, line up with the center of that kingpin bore to that one. I don't know if you can tell, but there's probably about a ½ inch of bend in this axle. You can't just go by the edge because the axle is tapered. So going by just the edge on the straight edge on the edge of it is not accurate because it's thicker here in the middle. It tapers down towards the ends. So you got to go by the center line. And it is bent, and it is also, I believe, twisted. Luckily, the 2035 one was just bent. It didn't appear to be twisted. We got to check it more carefully. But anyway, point of the story is we weren't sure how hard it was to straighten these axles because we had never done that before. Well, we figured we had nothing to lose with that 2035 axle. I mainly just picked it up for parts. If it was good, great. If not, I'm not out much. So Dad, once he had it apart like this one, he put it in the press back home and a little bit of pressure, and he was able to straighten it back out without much hassle at all, which was like, oh, okay, good to know. We didn't really know what to expect, if we were going to have to get a bigger press or if it needed heat, but just doing it cold with the 20-ton press back home, he was able to straighten it no problem. Wasn't even maxing out the press or anything. Pretty easy, really. So with that bit of knowledge, I decided today that, I'm going to try to see what I can do, see if I can straighten out this 1525 axle. And we'll start by straightening it, I think. And then once we have that taken care of, we'll assess how twisted it is and figure out an approach to hopefully straighten out the twist. So I started out by just cleaning all the crusties off of it. If you remember, we had a broken off bolt in this end to hold the kingpin in. So I got that out of there. I had to drill it out. I set it up in the drill press, nice and square, drilled it out, got the rest of the threads picked out of there, ran a tap through, cleaned that up, good to go there, ran a tap through this one. This one came out all right, but ran a tap through to clean up those threads. So I think what I will do when it gets to as far as the twists, I'm going to put these chunks of just straight rod pipe in these bores, hold them in place with a longer bolt, one on each end, and then we can sight down and get both of those, see how twisted it is first, and then when we're in the process of straightening it, we can use those to line things up, at least to get it roughly into place, and then we can figure out maybe a little bit more accurate way, put it on a nice flat surface and do some accurate measurements and whatnot to get it dialed in just perfect. That's the plan. Like I said, I got it kind of roughly cleaned up here, because also we want to get it straightened out before we do anything else. I mean, this center pivot point is all egg-shaped, so we're going to have to bore and bush that on the milling machine back home. We can't do any of that until this thing is straight, because we don't want to be boring it crooked. We got to make sure everything is flat and straight and bored 90, all that kind of fun stuff. So first things first, we got to see if we can straighten this out. Let's see if I can come up with some combination of blocks and whatnot in the press and see what I can do here. So here's a little bit better shot with the straight edge clamp from approximately center to center of the bores. You can see that it's about a ½ inch bent, like so. So here's with those pipes in the bores to show the twist. I got a straight edge sitting on that one, so where it should be, so to speak, versus where it actually is. So it's significantly twisted. It's going to be fun to try to get that straightened out. I gave up on the axle. This press just isn't going to do it. We'll have to wait until we get home and use the better one there. So then I switched over and I made a first real attempt at gas tank. I'm not done with it. It's not really a failure, but I'm not 100% happy with it either. You can see I've been hand working these ends here. I think I'll be able to save it and use it. If nothing else, we'll put it on the firewall side where you'll never even see it. But I think I've convinced myself that we got to change our approach. I don't think this hammer form method is the way to do it. It would work, like I said, and I think we'll be able to, this probably looks worse than what it really is. Those hammer marks, really, they're superficial. It's really pretty smooth. And worst case scenario, a thin skim of body filler or even some high build primer and a little bit of sanding would probably make these look pretty good, but it's not coming out as nice as I'd like to, and I've spent a lot of time to get it to this point. It's like I got to make 4 of these total, if not more, if other people want some. I want a way that I can do this a little bit more efficiently and come up with a little bit crisper. I think you know what I'm saying. Not quite happy with that. I think we're going to switch to more of a press approach. That's going to involve making some type of a metal form, because the wood, that ain't going to work in a press. So the shop is a disaster, so I must be getting something done, huh? I got all kinds of screwdrivers out, custom ground screwdrivers, because I took apart the carburetor today. So we got a bare casting now. I didn't really destroy anything, so that was a good day. I found some major wear, and somebody had been there before, and they put little sleeves to try to take up all that wear. I did manage to get out the Venturi, which is very amazing, because these are like cast pot metal, and they usually crumble when you look at them. This one actually came out pretty intact, chipped a little bit off the bottom. So we'll have a real good pattern. I think what we'll end up doing, like when I did my short fender 2035, has a very similar carburetor, and that Venturi just crumbled. So we actually made a new one out of aluminum, and we had less of a pattern to work off of than we do here. So we'll be able to, I'll probably drop a nice little blueprint of how this should be, the angles and whatever, for future reference as well. And then make up a new one. It's got 1 1/32 I'm not sure what that, I haven't measured it yet, if that's the inside, the smallest point there or what. But anyway, I'm happy that I got that out of there. What I ended up doing to do that was I took and ground a couple of washers exactly to the size of the bottom of the bore down inside here. You're not going to be able to see most of what I'm talking about in here because it's hard to film. But right down inside of there, those washers fit exactly. So this was inside of here like this, right? So I put a bolt down through with a couple of big washers and whatnot, and a nut on the bottom, and I used it like a puller with this on the bottom with a nut to pull it, and it actually started coming. And then with the combination of other longer bolts, and I had the throttle butterfly up here at one point when I got it out farther, just to continue pulling it out, various washers and spacers. You get the idea. It's not rocket science. But I got all the other parts and linkages and everything out, so we'll be able to clean up this casting and figure out some material for new shafts. And there's all the guts, all the parts and pieces. We'll probably go over all that more as we get it cleaned up and start to put things back together. But I think I'm going to have to clean up a little bit here. Like I said, the shop is a disaster with all these, using just about everything just to get this carburetor apart. So let's work on new races here a little bit. I got the left side pinion axle taken out here and related parts, so we can take a look at getting this race out of here. All that really holds it into place is this bolt, which goes into the hole opposite of that one. Got the new races here. There's the number. Matches the number there, which is the same as the number on the original. All original Hyatt USA bearings, which is pretty amazing these days that I can still get them, new old stock. So those are the two for the pinion bearings, and these are the two for the intermediate shaft. We will do that next. So I'm going to figure out my approach to removing these old ones, and we'll get the new ones put in then. Okay, here's what I came up with. Of course, my big puller and bar and everything is back in Wisconsin. So I took a few minutes and I just took some heavy bar stock and some bolts and some nuts and made up a puller bar. And I just used some standoffs from my Chinesium bearing splitter kit. There's nothing really right. They're not actually threaded in or anything. They're just using them as spacers. And then I made another custom length crossbar, just like we did to pull the races out of for the axle. We did the same process for that. Made the same type of a bar, only a little bit different size for these ones. Now it's just a matter of pulling it out. And it's coming really easy as expected, so shouldn't be too difficult. So I'll get this out and we'll clean it all up and figure out our process for putting the new one back in. I'm probably thinking I'll just tap it into place. No sense to overcomplicate matters here. There we go. Once I got it started, I was able to just pull the rod and actually pull it right out of there. It wasn't even in there hard at all. Well, let's see what the bore looks like. Dirty, as expected. Don't see any issues. I'll clean that all up here. On the right side, I took a little bit different approach to get it out because the left side came out so easy. I just took my same custom piece and rod and put a slide hammer weight on it, and I was able to tap out this right side bearing with, very little resistance. So that was considerably easier than setting up all the puller set up. Okay, I've got the bore cleaned out here. Next issue is fitment of the races. So this is the old race. If you put it in there, slips in pretty nice. And it fits pretty good. If there's play there, it's pretty darn insignificant. I'd be pretty happy with that fit. Because if you remember, there's these little shoulder bolts that goes in there, and the tip of it goes into that hole to keep that bearing from spinning or moving. It's not a real positive lock, but it locates it. So that's the old bearing. The issue is with the new bearing, which is the same thing, or supposed to be the same thing. It must be just a little bit smaller on the OD. Because when I put it in there, you're not going to be able to see it, of course, on the camera. But there's just a little bit of play in there. And I can easily spin it and whatever. There's just a little bit of little click there. And if you take the feeler gauges, there's about 2 or 3 thou play on the outside of that bearing, which is more than I would like to see. So I've been asking around, and the general consensus seems to be some Loctite 660 should work pretty good for this application. It's designed for like holding bearings in, and I guess it's applicable for things up to 20 thou loose, which is crazy loose in my opinion. I would never attempt to even use that type of a product to fix something if it was 20 thou loose. But for like this, where it's just a couple thou, 3 thou at most loose, I think it should be a pretty good fit. I just don't want that bearing sitting loose in there like that, running loose, because there's gonna be vibration and it'll eventually wear things more. I don't know, maybe the new ones were like that to a certain extent. Oh, now I got it stuck. If you don't have it perfectly straight, like I said, it's a pretty close fit. But these old ones are just that little bit tighter. Where there's almost no play to them. So I think that's probably where we will go with this. It might be done before you guys see this, but if not, if you have any advice on that, as far as what products to use or whatever, I'm all ears. Leave a comment below. And I've checked it on both sides. It's the same story on both sides, both bearings. They're both about that 2 or 3 thou loose fit. Well, my plan has changed then since I started here. I was just going to swap them out one at a time and put everything back together, be done. But now that I've discovered that we have this loose fitting issue and we're going to have to Loctite for our solution, I'm thinking I might as well pull apart this intermediate shaft and pull those bearings out and see if that's the same situation for them or not. And then if so, we'll do all 4 at the same time then. So I got the right side out already. That one came out pretty good. This side, the slide hammer wouldn't touch it, so I set up the homemade puller bar again. And getting it initially moving was actually pretty hard. It was stuck in there pretty good. Now that it's moving, it's coming fine. As I was doing this, I was thinking to myself, well, we can officially say that every single piece has been out of this casting now, because these were the last 4 things, these outer races. These are the last 4 things that were not out of this tractor. So officially we can say every single thing has been out of this. It's been a bare transmission casting. Not too many people can say that they take their restorations down quite that far. Even I wasn't planning on taking these out. You know, I was just gonna let them be for a while. And then when I discovered I could get new bearings, it's like, well, for this deep, you might as well just do it. These ones in particular, these intermediate shafts, really weren't that terrible, but you gotta be careful. Those might as well, we're this deep. Just about there. It's pretty loose now. I could probably just about, well, maybe not. I was gonna say pull it out by hand, but probably pretty close. We're over halfway. I can see the hole. There it comes. Come on. There. Ta-da! Yeah, that one must have been a little bit tighter fit because there isn't nearly as much oil, grease behind that bearing. So it must have been a little bit tighter fit in that housing. That's a good sign. Maybe we won't have to use any Loctite on these. I have the bores all cleaned up, checked, and the right side race is already installed. I'm really happy with how that went. It was just a very light interference fit, just like I would like to see. I tapped it in with a soft hammer. No looseness at all, like the pinion ones, so I didn't worry about any Loctite on that. I already have the locating bolt loosely in there, so I know that the hole lines up. You can see the tip of the bolt in there. I will come and put a little bit of sealant on that when I'm all said and done, so there's no oil leaks out of that bolt. Now I'm in the process of putting the left side intermediate roller bearing race in. This one was a little bit snugger, just like it was going out. It was the same going back in. So I set up my homemade puller, going back the opposite direction now. Just pulling off of that side of the housing. And we will finish installing that. A little trick. I took a pencil and drew a line on the bottom of the bore there in line with the hole, so I could perfectly line it up with the hole in the bearing. So hopefully when it gets in there, it is lined up correctly. It's not just guessing that way. maybe it's okay. I thought my hole was rotating. Slip it in really easy. Happy with how the fit is. There again, it's not too tight, not too loose. Got the Goldilocks just right. I can see my hole now. Out there. There. Just like that. Finalized it by putting a little bit of schmutz on the threads of the bolts, tightening them up on both sides. Let's put this intermediate shaft back together. Everything's back together. Everything spins nicely. I'm really happy with everything here. Well, thank you all for coming and visiting with me here at Swanson's Garage. I hope to see you all next weekend.